Hey everybody, this is Scott from Lawrence Hypnotherapy, and welcome back to video 2 of how to cure depression. And thank you so much for being a part of this training, because it's really cool that so many of you that watched it shared it. And I know that it's like one of those risky topics when you start talking about depression, which is something which is quite personal to a lot of people. You've got to treat the topic with respect, but that does not mean that you need to share the beliefs of every other person who is out there. So everything in this video basically comes from my work, from my experience, and research that I've done, and training that I've done. But basically this is my own opinion, my own expression of the 4,000 clients that I've seen for things such as depression or insomnia or addiction doing hypnotherapy. So in the last video we covered the what is depression map of the anxiety, depression, the past, present, future, and kind of how that goes together. Again, if you haven't got the ebook yet, tell me, because the ebook is ready. The ebook is out there. Just tell me you want it, and I'll give you a copy. It is over 7,000 words because it is thorough, and it goes along all these maps and explains these circles better. In the next video after this one, we're going to be going through the human needs map, which is a massive part of this entire training. Because in order to be not depressed, people do need to have their needs met. And there are techniques and strategies to really, the needle movers, to make those work, the ones that I've been working with my clients for the last 8 years, the ones that I've found work the best. But let's get into today's training, which is this funny map here, this circle in the middle. Let's see what's going on with my computer. Here we go. So how to cure depression. This map that kind of looks like a snowman has been the picture that I've drawn the most for 4,000 different clients over the last 8 years, because it's the basis, the majority of my entire work. So the C stands for the conscious mind. So the conscious mind being smaller than the subconscious, not actual size. So basically the conscious mind, where it has the word logic next to it, that does not mean that the conscious mind is logical. What it means is the conscious mind understands logic, but that doesn't mean that it necessarily behaves according to logic, because the conscious mind is actually not responsible for behavior. The subconscious is. And the subconscious doesn't understand logic. It's not that it understands it and is rebellious and tries to do the opposite. It just doesn't use logic. It uses something else. It has memory engrams and behaviors and patterns and all sorts of things down there which have been formed over time. Strategies that in the past were what the person developed in order to get through the next challenge ahead of them. And then the next time that same challenge was there, they used the same strategy again and again and again. But the language of the subconscious mind is sensory. It is pictures, sounds, feelings. So basically the hippocampus, which is the memory center in the temporal lobe of the brain, it's your memory. It's from the midbrain. And so then you've got your amygdala, which is like the drug dealer of the brain, the midbrain. And then you've got this whole thing that happens that the logic part, the conscious mind, gets left out of most behaviors. So you've got this part down here pretty much responsible for most of the behavior that people have. So that behavior can be to do things, or to feel things, or to think things. These words up here, such as don't, stop, quit, and not, those words are up there next to logic for a reason. So I don't know if you know of Carl Barron, that Australian comedian, who basically says, you know, like Australians, we don't answer questions, we answer the opposite of questions, and you have to guess all the gaps. Like things like, how are you? Yeah, not bad. Well, I can't get a picture or sound or a feeling of not. So what are you? If you're not bad, then what are you? Or asking stuff like, do you want to go for a walk? Yeah, where are we going to go? Oh, it's not far. Well, I'm going to pull out my GPS and type not far, and like, well, it didn't come up on the GPS. Or I want to buy the car. How much is the car? Oh, it's not cheap. Great, I'm going to write you a check right now for not cheap. So does it kind of make sense that the pictures and the sounds and the feelings are the things that are driving behaviors? Whatever you keep saying, the word pictures, the self-talk you keep using, or the words you use about feelings, they are creating programs that become repeatable. To get you straight into kind of like the concept of how this works, that in hypnosis, to create suggestion, to actually program a person's mind, this needs to be acknowledged. This don't, stop, quit, and not. Any negations are not part of the suggestion. So these words get ignored. I want to take you first into a bit of a treat, a bit of a video that I did in front of a classroom when I was a lecturer at the Academy of Hypnotic Science, teaching diploma students how the mind works and how to create hypnotic phenomenon. So let's get into this video. Or the way I like to describe this, I do this in the smoking one as well. I've got to use that picture later, but I can redraw it, I'm sure. Power language. So there's the conscious mind and the subconscious, which is so much bigger. I should really call it positive sensory language, because your conscious mind understands logic, your subconscious mind understands pictures, sounds, and feelings. And so all these habits you've got, like, how do you talk? How do you walk? Or how do you... when you talk, do you start with an in or an out breath? Or do you start... What do you do with the lips or the tongue? Do you start with a verb or a noun? Or, I don't really know how I talk, I just mean to talk, just stuff comes out. I think about what I mean to say and it just seems to come out. Because these habits in the subconscious, they know exactly what they're doing. Can everyone see that? So if I've got the eat at breakfast, eat at lunch, eat at dinner, and then there's TV. So what's happening is that you might say, should I eat or not eat? Or if I said, can you think of the number 3, would everybody be thinking of the number 3? Just because I said it. So it's in you. So that could go into maybe it's either a picture or it's a sound or whatever. But then if I say, can you please not think of 3? Try really hard to not think of 3. Is everyone still thinking of 3? So would you say that still goes in to the sub? So with eat or not eat, logically, you know what not means, but the subconscious has no clue what not means. It doesn't know what a negation is. Can you give a handful of don't? Like somebody puts don't in my hand, but there's no such... You can't have a picture or a sound or a feeling of don't. So with eat or don't eat, it gets rid of not, it grabs that, eat, just eat. And that becomes the habit. So when I see a TV, if I say, should I eat in front of the TV or should I not eat in front of the TV? What are you seeing? Yeah. Who here thought of pink elephant? Or like, who here thought of eating in front of the TV? So literally, when I say power language, it really means sensory, picture, sound, and feeling language instead of logic, because the subconscious doesn't understand logic. If ever you've had a battle with yourself, just go, I really should have like the willpower to not eat, but I'm just not feeling it. Does that sort of prove that there's sort of two minds going on? There's what you logically want, and there's how you behave is always a reflection of not what you want to have happen, but of what you describe happening. So who here likes chocolate? Okay, so everybody, please don't imagine getting up in the middle of the night and getting chocolate from the fridge. And also, don't think about the familiar footsteps, or maybe, what's the distance to the fridge? And don't imagine that as you get to the fridge, the cool metal handle, as you open the fridge, suddenly lets go, and that cool puff of air. I don't want anyone to think about the eyes readjusting to the light of the fridge, or that purple Cadbury's block, or the tearing of the cardboard and the smell of it maybe, or the gliding of the alfoil and the snapping of the chocolate, that sound. Don't think about this at all. And then maybe the uneven break or the crumbs that seem to come, or as maybe you take it into the kitchen, maybe there's some footsteps. And then don't think about the chocolate, don't smell it, don't kind of feel it melting in your fingers. Do I need to lick that off, or do I need to wash my hands? Like, who here had an experience of chocolate just then? Does it make sense what people are doing to themselves? They keep describing what they don't want instead of what they do want. Okay, so hopefully the point of that video makes sense, which is that it really doesn't matter what the logic says, it really matters what the picture, sounds, and feelings say. So how do we relate this back to the topic? How to cure depression? To actually cure it? Well, for starters, not with logic, not with don't, not with stop, not with quit, not with not. Down here, we've got some other things going on, so I'm just going to fast forward to that part. So we know that logic really isn't the answer. The don't, stop, quit, and not isn't the answer. The subconscious has its own language going on. It has pictures, sounds, and feelings. So there's a bit of a framework down here that I want to teach, and I want to take my time with it because there's a lot here to cover. Just to kind of like get ahead of this, these 5 F's, we couldn't think of a better word than fornicate to mean sex, or not something that's polite enough. So just to kind of frame, like, what is this? So when we're talking about the pictures, sounds, and feelings, if you use words that are in alignment, in orientation with the pleasure, you will get a lot better result than if you use words that are in alignment with the pain. And so that pain sensory is going to be things like depressed, anxious, hurt. Pleasure, positive sensory for pleasure, is going to be things like calm, relaxed, in love, abundant, those kind of words which program the brain. So there are 3 layers. There's the 5 F's, the 3 N's, and the 2 P's. And so we call all of this stuff ego, basically, because it's the 5, so for E, G, O, for basically the E is your essential instincts. So you've got these 5 essential instincts, which is the fight, flight, food, family, fornicate. You've got the 3 gates, which is where these essential instincts come from. So the E, the G, so the E for essential instinct, G for gate, so where they come from, and O for orientation. So it's essential, and then there's gate, and then there's orientation, and that's where it's E, G, O for ego. It explains this slightly differently in the ebook, but just like let me give you examples of how this relates directly to depression. You can combine any one of these with any one of these with any one of these. So combine any one of the orientations with any one of the gates with any one of the essential instincts. So let's say that someone's having, we'll start with pain. Pain, normal, which basically means habit. So they've just done it before until it's normal. And something to do with fight. So how this works, how these 3 combined for something that can be depression. There are 2 people that are arguing with each other. Every time they see each other, they argue. Every time they see each other, it's normal for them to fight, and it creates pain. So it's basically just a pathway in the head. A long time ago, one of these people stepped on another one of their toes. Like one person basically blocked their pathway of how to get either money, relationships, or health. And ever since, it's become normal for them to fight. I just want to go through these one at a time, just to kind of explain what they're about. So fight, just by itself, is anything which is to move your life forward. So this is one of the ego needs. This is one of the essential instincts, is to move your life forward. If you do it in a pain way, it's something that creates like a hazard for both you and someone else, or hazard or violence or abuse, or something that's going to be very myopic, very kind of like short-term successful, long-term painful. But fight, when done properly, can be sophisticated. It can be sport, it can be to play your best game, it can be to do the best at life that you can do. And we want to use sensory positive for this, which means planning goals to fight for. If you can plan some goals that you can move toward, it's a lot easier to lift the mood if you have this thing ahead of you, lifting you, something to excite you. Flight, again, is basically, this is to hedge your bets, to say, to escape unharmed, to say basically that it's not worth it. Someone's kind of like, yelling at me in the street. I don't know who they are. They kind of scare me. I'm going to walk away. I'm not going to go defend my honor. I'm going to let them win this argument. I'm going to let them win this battle. So flight can be really good, but in the pain sense, flight can be avoidance. It can be not doing anything with your life. And so the fight is like when you decide, like, it's worth it, I'm going to go after it. Flight is going to be like when it's not worth it, I'm not going to go after it. And so like with these 2, the way they work is that people are often saying yes to the wrong things and no to the... so they're saying yes to the things they should be saying no to, and they're saying no to the things they should be saying yes to, because they're not thinking long-term enough about what they want out of their life, or they've believed that because in the past something was so difficult, they got hurt, that they believe that throughout the future that every other situation they go through is also going to hurt. Maybe there was something in childhood where they had to run away from it, they had to avoid it for their own safety, but they grew up, they became an adult, and becoming an adult really means something because you're bigger, you're smarter, you're potentially richer, you're potentially so much more capable of achieving in your life. Yet kind of the normal framework in the brain basically says, well, I don't know, I think I got hurt in the past, I expect to get hurt again. So flight's one of those essential instincts that can work with you or against you. You can't get rid of any of these essential instincts, they are there, but you can change how you work with them. Food, so this could be to do with like eating, drinking, even going to the bathroom. Again, this is one of those essential instincts. And so you can use it for good, you can use it for bad, you can use it for positive, you can use it for negative. You can use it for pain, you can use it for pleasure. If you are eating to make your body healthier, you're basically doing it for long-term pleasure. If you're eating for therapy, you need a different style of therapy because it's not going to make you happier in the long term. The thing about food is that if somebody is going through anxiety and they're too high, they're too kind of overclocked, they're too overwhelmed, food brings people down into the parasympathetic nervous system where they relax. It literally calms them down. Another thing about food is when they're depressed, because it releases dopamine, which is the reward hormone in the brain, which basically gets released from the amygdala and transmitted to the receptors in the brainstem. It's a feedback loop of that. If you think about, junk food, you get a reward, you get excitement even before you've had it, even if you don't enjoy the experience of the junk food, even if you beat yourself up for having it, even if it's destroying your health. So that food is a technique that people have been using for therapy for far too long, instead of actually facing the things that are really important in their life and deciding that they're going to open that back up again, but open it up in a way where they're allowed to only show up 80% every now and then. Say that I've got this 80% chance that I'm going to show up every day, 20% chance that I'm not going to show up any day because sometimes I'm not well, or sometimes I'm busy, sometimes I've taken on too much, and I need to have the right to actually say, no, I don't want this. But with the opportunity to keep moving forward and say, yes, I do want this. So when your sorting mechanism doesn't involve food for therapy, overall, you'll be a lot happier. And then family, which basically we're using this to say anyone who is your tribe, your co-workers, the people you hang out with, the people that you trust, the people that you live with, could be blood related, could be non-blood related. This is your tribe. So what people want from their relationships, their connections, is to be both safe and resonant. If there are relationships where you don't feel physically safe, your safety needs to come first. If there's physical abuse, just get out. Look after your physical safety first. If there's an emotional abuse, really asking yourself, do you need to see that person, or do you need to see them as much? Measure how you feel before and after seeing people. If there are people that you see that you always feel rubbish after seeing, you can kind of go, well, maybe that's a trigger. Maybe that person isn't particularly good for my mental or physical health right now. You need to feel safety, but you also need to feel resonance, as in like what we call the Marco Polo effect. You call out with a Marco, you expect the polo back. You tell the joke, you kind of want a connection. You want like a laughter back. You want something back from them to kind of go like, yeah, I see you. People have got this big sign on their forehead saying, please see me, please validate me. Validate my ego ticket. And on the fornicate, again, we're just using this to mean sex. That desire to reproduce, or at least that desire to mate with people. This is something that can be used for good or bad as well. When used consensually, recreationally, with conception, whatever it is, it's thought through. When against someone's will, it's really horrible. It's really quite a tragedy. When done kind of like drunk and then kids show up which they didn't expect, again, that can cause issues. So people are sometimes using sex for therapy where they shouldn't. They should be using sex for pleasure, not to band-aid an issue that really needs to be addressed as well. That doesn't mean that people can't have sex. It means that the sex isn't going to necessarily address the issue. But it's still an instinct, because this is how our species, we wouldn't exist unless pleasure, like oxytocin, came from sex. So the next layer, so these are the gates. Normal is basically just the brain pathways that exist, so that in the past, you have used a particular technique to get a particular result. Whether that's still working or not, you tend to do the same thing over and over. Again, if you clap, one thumb should be over the other. They might be side by side, but usually one thumb's over the other. If you clap again, it's the same thumb. If you clap again, it's the same thumb. People do things so habitually, how do you speak? What do you do with the lips, the tongue, the vocal cords, the lungs? Do you start with a verb or a noun? How do you make words come out of your mouth? How do you make paragraphs come out? It's normal. It's been learned. It's a learned behavior. So depression and anxiety are very much triggered learned behaviors. Like when they talk about Pavlov's dog, where they basically trained a dog to salivate whenever they rang a bell. this Russian behavioral psychologist, Pavlov, basically started off by giving his dogs food, and then after a while, the dogs would associate the dinner bell that he rang with the food. And so when the dogs started to hear the dinner bell, they would salivate, even when there was no food present. So he could ring the bell, that was Pavlov's bell, and the dogs would salivate. So these are those Pavlovian responses, as in that, like, if every time you see a person you feel depressed, then every time you see them again, you're probably going to feel depressed again, because they're the pathways that you have built, unless you break the pattern and make the change. If that makes sense? So the Pavlovian response, it's anchored. Your feelings are on cue. They've been learned, and they repeat over and over and over. How many words have you said this year? Probably more than you think. How many footsteps have you made this year? Probably more than you think. People do things more frequently than they think. They feel feelings probably more frequently than they think. And it's important to know that, because it kind of shows that we're dealing with some large numbers here. So that normal basically usually means blind in a way, as in, like, we're blind to how high the numbers are, how often we've done the behavior. So that if you want to make new patterns, remember, like we were talking about pictures, sounds, and feelings? Remember that other video that we just went through? You need to use positive pictures, positive sounds, positive feeling suggestions to be able to create new habits. So that was the normal gate. The needs gate, we cover more of this in the next video, when we talk about the 5 words that start with the letter B of the 5 human needs. Needs are things that cannot be ignored. So when it comes to normal, like if people just normally whistle every time they enter a house, it doesn't cause them any pain when they stop. But if people need something, they need it. It's non-negotiable. If you basically are one of those people who go like, Monday morning, 9 o'clock, cool, I'm going to work on my money, my relationships, my health. Not fun, because fun's not important. Happiness is not important, it's not professional. We're going to put that to the end. We're going to put happiness to Friday night, and then we're going to work it out then. You get to Friday night, and you're a little bit tired, but you want to play. And you're like, you know what, I haven't made any plans for happiness. I haven't had any plans for fun. Well, if you haven't made any plans for fun, and you definitely can't be bothered when you're exhausted on Friday night, but still have the energy to play, you're probably going to be going for some low-hanging fruit, which means that you're probably going to be going for some styles of fun that have been normal for so long, but they don't really fulfill your needs long-term. They fulfill these short-term needs. So the needs gate is really about short-term emotional needs, which is that if you could by Monday or Tuesday work out what you're doing on the weekends, or if you could by, let's say, breakfast or lunchtime work out what you'd like to do for fun at night, you'll be making much better decisions on how to fulfill your needs. But if you don't fulfill your needs, or if your client doesn't get their needs fulfilled, they will still seek out those needs. You can go basically 3 months without fulfilling your emotional needs. That's it. By then, the basic ganglia gets exhausted, the part of the brain that's the brakes, the part of the brain that goes all discipline all the time, it gets exhausted. But your sensory neurons do not get exhausted. They just go. So that you need to make sure that you're getting your needs met. And sometimes it means, like, you should be journaling. You should be getting a piece of paper and a pen at least once to twice per week and writing down, what do you want in life? This is something that's so important. I get people to do it in the therapy, that we get them to write down what their needs are. We get them to, there's videos that we have of the ABCD, which is a good way to break it down. A for achievement, people want to get to the end of the list. B for breathing space, they want boundaries, they want to have a break. C for connection, they want to be around others. D for discovery, they want reward and novelty if they've been focusing too much. The third gate is nature. So this is needs of the body. Sleep when people are tired, hydration when people are thirsty, carbohydrates when the body requires some energy, or fats when the body requires some energy in order to consume, because the mitochondria of the cell needs to set fire to something to create energy for the cells to live. So you need food. You also need to breathe. You also need, well, exercise is a need, but it's basically the least of the urgent needs. So to tell you basically the order of urgency, it's first breathe, and then it is sleep, and then it is hydrate, and then it is eat clean, and then it is exercise. So you do need to exercise to be healthy. It's how your limbic system, basically through movement, pushes the toxins through, to the lymph nodes, like where you can then, like from the circulatory system, filter them out of the body. You need to move. It's not enough just to kind of like, just to eat less. You also need to move the body. But you can not exercise for a lot longer than you can not eat clean. Eating clean is way more urgent than exercise, even though you should be exercising every day. And then hydration is a lot more urgent than eating clean. And then sleeping is a lot more urgent than hydration. So people, like when they talk about weight loss, when they talk about health, people might talk about exercise, people might talk about nutrition, but not a lot of people, or not enough people, are talking about the importance of sleep and the importance of hydration. You can lose up to 30% of your cognitive ability if you are up to 5% dehydrated until you drink a glass of water. If you had a friend who lost 30% of their cognitive ability, you'd feel sorry for them. You'd feel that you want to help them out, if that makes sense. So you want to make sure that you're drinking water. And you don't want adrenal fatigue. You don't want to be so stressed about everything all the time because you sort of feel like, oh, I didn't finish my set at the gym. I'm going to bring my weights home from the gym and finish the set there. That sounds ridiculous. So it should also sound ridiculous to say, I didn't finish my work, I'm going to bring my laptop home. Or I didn't finish worrying about work, I'm going to bring my worries about work home. You're not going to finish them at home. So some of your biological, natural needs is to have rhythm, which is that you rise with the sun and you do your work. You worry about money, health, relationships, you get those things done. Later in the afternoon, 3 or 4 o'clock, stop overshooting the day. Stop drinking so much caffeine at 3 or 4 p.m. or 8 or 9 p.m. Stop working on stuff by that time of night. You will be more efficient if you have rhythm. Get it done, let it go. Get it done, let it go. That's what the body likes. And then the final layer is the orientations. So pain, which basically that the brain punishes you for this. The brain punishes you by giving you stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and then physical sensations throughout the body for things that you don't like. The brain rewards you, endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, for things that are basically things that you do like. Now these two aren't always accurate for the long term. They're generally more accurate for the short term, as in like you stepped on something sharp, it punishes you. You eat something that has some sugar in it, it rewards you. If that makes sense. So zooming out of this again, so this is the ego. So basically the essential instincts, so E, G for gates, O for orientation. So the orientation is what direction? That's what the ego is. That's our model of the ego. So just to kind of summarize this whole thing, if you want to jumpstart this entire process, 2 pieces of advice to get started straight away. One is journal more. Write down what you want and start unpacking it. Start unpacking like a Sudoku, where you go like, what are the tools that I already have? What are the resources that I already have? Who are the people that I already have? What's the finances that I already have? What are the dreams that I already understand, that I already know that I want? And then just like a Sudoku, it's only once you start filling in the easy answers that it becomes easier to start filling in the hard answers. So a lot of people, like if they want to write a book, they don't even get a pen and paper. They don't even open the laptop. They don't even open the typing document, the Word document, word processor. They don't even get to that stage. They don't even write, oh, here's the names of 12 chapters that I'd like to have. They don't give it a go. Because normal and pain, they remember that they had pain before, so they go into flight. If that makes sense. So one piece of advice is to journal more. The other is, remember like that video? Pictures, sounds, and feelings? Stop using negative pictures, sounds, and feelings to describe what you want. Instead, don't say to people, I'm sorry, I'm late. Say thank you for your patience. Don't say to people, don't panic. Say to them, well, how can I help you to relax? Don't say to people, let's say like a relationship one. Don't say that there's people who hate me. Say there's all these people who love me, who enjoy my company. So even though what we're talking about is to focus on the positive, and that is positive psychology, there is this entire other psychology, which is like acceptance, like with ACT, happiness trap, things like that. It is important to accept the things you cannot change. And they're basically like the needs part, especially in the next video, we'll be talking about accepting the things that you cannot change. Because when it comes to grief, when it comes to anything kind of like grief, when it comes to having to wait because of the delay before you get what it is that you want in your life, when it comes to like health conditions that you can't cure overnight, when it comes to anything that you literally can't change, just like that saying of change the things you can, accept the things you can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. You need rhythm. You need to get it done, and you need to let it go. Get done the things you can. Let go of and stop focusing on some of the things you can't change, and your life will become better. So thanks again so much for being part of this video. Thanks for being part of this training. do ask if you haven't had the ebook yet, or if you haven't had the previous video yet. And do watch out for the next video, because we're going to be talking about, just to give you a little bit of preview, we're not going to go into it in this video, but in the next one, the human needs map and what to do about each one. We put a lot of work into this over the last 8 years for the actual needle moving strategies to how do you create joy, how do you create happiness, how do you make it sustainable, and how do you make it last. Of course, someone was asking, is there an upsell at the end of this? Of course there is. We're doing a live event in Melbourne. If you're watching the replay and this date passed, there'll be a replay. If you're in Melbourne and you want to basically get along to this thing, let us know. We're doing $17 early bird and $60 on the door. Let us know if you want to be a part of it. So thank you so much for being a part of this training, and I'll see you in the next video.